Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. In this episode, we focus on one of the most political and most explosive questions on the European agenda in 2026, Ukraine's accession to the European Union and how it could happen and how quickly, and whether the EU can deliver something credible. See, Kyiv wants a date. Brussels is debating new formats like front-loading and even a membership-light model that is sometimes described as reverse enlargement, bringing Ukraine into parts of the Union early, then phasing in full rights as well as obligations later. But enlargement still runs on unanimity, and Hungary's veto is the hard wall that everyone keeps hitting, so the EU is also quietly gaming out political workarounds from pressure campaigns to Article 7, so-called nuclear option. To find out what's realistic and what's just messaging, let's have a look at this report.
In Brussels, there is a growing recognition that Ukraine's accession is part of the EU's geopolitical posture, but credibility remains key. If the Union cannot offer a concrete pathway, whether through phased integration or a clear political timeline, it risks weakening both reform momentum in Ukraine and its own strategic leverage. That broader strategic logic has also explained why the EU is moving in parallel on financing. Even as debates over accession models continue, member states have agreed on a €90 billion loan package for 2026 and 2027, €30 billion for budget support, and €60 billion for defense procurement, designed to stabilize Ukraine economically and militarily while the political question of membership is worked out. Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic will be exempt from financial obligations under the arrangement after opposing additional assistance. The remaining 24 member states are expected to cover associated costs, estimated by the European Commission at between €2 billion and €3 billion annually. Procurement rules were a key point in negotiations. Under a so-called cascading principle, purchases must first be made in Ukraine and a defined group of European partner nations. If equipment is not available there, Kyiv may turn to other suppliers, including the United States. Countries with security partnerships with the EU, such as the United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, and Canada, may have priority in terms of defense procurement, but only if they contribute to borrowing costs. Disbursements will be conditional on Ukraine maintaining democratic reforms and anti-corruption measures. Repayment is formally tied to potential war reparations from Russia, a prospect Moscow has rejected. On February 11th, the European Parliament passed the loan with 458 votes in favor and 140 against, paving the way for a new wave of financing for Ukraine.
And now, let's zone in on the East-planning portion of our show. After years of successive financial contributions to Ukraine, the European Union is weighing an unprecedented idea. Brussels is considering offering Ukraine partial membership in the EU before it completes the full state of accession reforms. As always, here's a closer look.
According to EU officials and diplomats cited by Politico on February 10th, the concept, informally dubbed reverse enlargement, would allow Kyiv to take a seat at the EU table while phasing in rights and obligations over time. Instead of joining at the end of the reform process, Ukraine would be brought in at the beginning, with democratic, judicial, and governance reforms continuing in parallel. Supporters argue that the move would send a powerful political signal at a critical moment. President Zelensky has pushed for a clear 2027 accession date, framing EU membership as both a security guarantee and part of any future peace deal with Russia. EU officials stressed that there would be no shortcuts on reforms. The goal, they say, is not to dilute standards, but to prevent accession fatigue and anchor Ukraine firmly in Europe while it completes the transformation required for full membership. The biggest obstacle remains unanimity. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban opposes Ukraine's entry and has used the issue in domestic politics. EU capitals are watching Hungary's upcoming election closely while also considering legal and political options should a veto persist. Whether partial membership becomes reality will depend less on technical readiness than on political will inside the European Union.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. So let's start with the basic facts. Ukraine's EU track is no longer just an economic project. Kyiv frames it as a security guarantee and wants that guarantee written into any peace framework. President Volodymyr Zelensky has been explicit that without a specific accession date, Russia will work to block the process. The EU's official line is cautious on dates, but the politics are shifting. In recent days, Germany's defense minister, Boris Pistorius, signaled that agreeing on a specific accession date is realistic, while also stressing it would require negotiations and separate preparatory work. Ukraine applied in February of 2022, gained candidate status later that year, and accession talks were formally opened in 2024. However, the real negotiating work conducted baby step by baby step, are still being slowed by Hungary's reluctance, among other factors. And that's why Brussels is discussing something unusual. The idea is to make practical preparations regardless of whether formal cluster openings are blocked, essentially doing as much real work as possible before the political deadlock is resolved. So the question for 2026 isn't whether Ukraine belongs in Europe, it's whether Europe can build a credible accession pathway fast enough to beat Russian sabotage, internal veto politics, and institutional inertia. And if Brussels can move, it should be honest about what it can deliver, because ambiguity is exactly what the Kremlin weaponizes. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Belina Chakarova, founder of the FACE Geopolitical Consultancy. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So today we are trying to look at Ukraine's EU accession process and whether or not it is actually realistic. This has been a pretty tough topic for God knows how many years now, and it does seem like EU has been dangling membership like a carrot in front of Ukraine. In your assessment, do you think, first of all, is actually something realistic, achievable, and logistically, could it be done?
Membership is in the European Union is very important strategic goal for this Ukrainian leadership, and in my view is absolutely feasible. We can discuss, of course, the timeline because right now the Ukrainian leadership has expressed its wish for a speeded up process of enlargement. And at the same time, of course, we can also discuss the exact scope of integration. I argue that gradual integration makes much more sense than actually formula as from the past that fits all, and that is of course the formula where once all of course chapters are being closed, once all basically the whole process of introducing structural reforms is completed and there is a green line from the European Commission, that means the technical process of enlargement is completed, then the political process begins, which is for the member states to give green light for the new membership. And I argue that given the new circumstances, there can be also an adapted process of enlargement, which necessitates Ukraine to be accepted in a much quicker way than it used to be the case in previous periods. We do not have the luxury of time. We cannot let Ukraine implement reforms for another 5-10 years and leave it up to it on its own politically and also in terms of institutional reform. So in that sense, I think that all of this is feasible with the adequate political will that comes from the member states, with the adequate institutional support that comes from the Commission and from the other institutions, and with the adequate sense of reality that we basically need to develop and to apply when it comes to the new reality on the global arena and the new reality in Europe.
Do you think that this EU aspiration would actually be something that would drive Ukraine's reform to speed up as well, something that kind of leads ahead of it? Or do you think that EU's enlargement aspiration would actually necessitate it to accept Ukraine sooner rather than later?
First and foremost, the European Union enlargement aspiration is real and present in the Ukrainian population. There is a very clear vision that actually points to Ukraine being part of the family of European Union member states, and this vision is being shared by both population and leadership in Ukraine. And second, this vision is also being shared by the majority, almost the absolute majority of member states, of the current member states of the European Union and the European Union institutions. Again, it's really about the technicalities. The whole enlargement process is actually a very technical one. It necessitates a lot of if you wish, civilizational effort on behalf of such large-scale country as Ukraine, and Ukraine is also currently in war times, not in peace times, to undergo all the reforms and to actually speed up the process of enlargement. It's a very technical process, which of course necessitates a lot of effort, as I said, but at the same time, the benefits follow the membership rather than happen ahead of it, which of course is the big tricky issue for politicians to also convince the own population of the need and of the advantages of the membership. But again, here in this case, Ukrainians do not need to be convinced on the benefits of membership. Membership in the European Union is an absolute must for the future, for the political, but also for the strategic existence of Ukraine as a country, as a sovereign country. And in that sense, I think that what we are currently seeing in terms of ongoing debate on behalf of the representatives of the Commission, on behalf of the Ukrainian leadership to kind of try to maybe adapt the whole approach a little bit is more or less a realistic reflection of all these needs and visions that I've outlined very shortly for you.
Right. I think you mentioned something very crucial here about how the technical aspect of it is actually relatively difficult. Is there any danger that the process of Ukraine going into the EU might get stuck in the technicality, and also much like a lot of countries that's still in limbo for so many years because of getting lost in the sauce, essentially?
Such risk is always present when it comes to that kind of large-scale technical processes. Of course, we have to factor in also a risk linked to some sort of institutional inertia, or let's say political hurdles on the way towards membership, when it comes also to lack of implementation in specific areas. I mean, this is something that's been also the case in the past with other membership candidates. That should not be unique to Ukraine, but at the same time, we should not forget that here we are dealing with a very different situation. So the mindset, of course, on behalf of the Ukrainian leadership is to make anything possible, also in technical terms, to not just speed up the process of membership, but to actually make it happen. So again, yes, there is a technical dimension, but then there is the political dimension, and then there is the diplomatic dimension. And on all three tracks, there is a push towards, let's say, much quicker enlargement process when it comes to Ukraine. Then, of course, there is an adaptation to the process now that they are dealing also with so-called clusters in specific areas that could be actually speeded up process of enlargement, which wasn't possible in the past. So even if you look at it from a technical perspective, you clearly see that now reality is such that the adaptation is happening, much quicker, let's say, speed than before, and that's in that sense, I don't think that the technicalities will be the problem here. I think that it's going to be more about the political and the diplomatic dimension rather than the technical one when it comes to the exact, let's say, dates. Because when it comes to the political dimension, we have now kind of a clash over vision about the time frame of the process. But when it comes to the technical one, I think that due to the ongoing war, we had already some issues which have been solved in the past. And I think that now there is a higher preparedness and much clearer mindset about the technicalities of the process.
All right. And it does seem like when it comes to the technical stuff, and this is the case where that saying, where there is a will, there is a way, is probably best suited than ever. And it does seem like it will depend on the political will of the participating countries to decide whether or not Ukraine would actually be stuck in a technicality or being used as a tool to delay integration. We see Ukraine being joining the EU single market being quite a hot button issue and have become relatively politically divisive in various different EU countries. Do you think that that is also going to be like a potential issue that further delays integration?
I argue that that's probably the most reasonable way of gradual integration to make sure that Ukraine becomes part of the common market as quick as possible. So it joins the common market as quick as possible. Now, this is, for instance, a very clear milestone in terms of technical progress on the way to full membership. And at the same time, a lot of the issues that are also linked to the technicalities of the process are also, are going to be solved on the way towards integration into common market. Think of the major sensitive issues such as agriculture policy. Of course, I think that one way how to solve these issues is exactly by trying to actually make sure that it's a workable solution, and a workable solution can only emerge once Ukraine is member of the common market, rather than trying to implement all these reforms ahead of the process and then actually ensure in some sort of roadmap between 2027 2030 and beyond that Ukraine is eligible for membership. So yes, of course, I expect that on behalf of some member states, there will be sensitive issues, competition obviously with such a large-scale member that is about to join are unavoidable. But at the same time, the past has shown that even the most critical conflictual issues are much easier to be solved within the framework of a common compromise rather than on the path towards perpetual conflict and and tension. So in that sense, I'm rather positive that this should be the way forward, rather vice versa. Following the traditional and conservative way of enlargement, because it will lead to nowhere every time when there is a new political landscape in one or other member state that somehow tries to exploit the membership issue of Ukraine. There's going to be, of course, the perfect environment to do so. And in that sense, let's look at the process from a technical and from benefits-based position rather than from the position, and even if you wish, actually from a geopolitical-based position rather than from the position of technicalities.
Right, that makes a lot of sense for the proposed gradual integration model. Do you think we would be able to see anything substantial by, let's say, 2027?
I expect that we will see something substantial on this matter prior to 2027. That would be the, let's say, midterm of political horizon. Yeah. Even if we do not get a formal date for full membership, I still think that the progress on accession clusters, as I already outlined, may continue behind the scenes with, of course, with institutional support. So the Commission, I think, if you listen to the speech of the Commissioner Marta Koch, if you also listen to the political statements of major member states, I think that, yes, of course, major decisions will still need anonymity, but Ukraine is actually in the position to secure political signals and to secure support for these clusters and for this gradual integration right ahead of the 2030 milestone benchmark, where actually full accession date commitment is expected on behalf of the Ukrainian leadership for the next institutional framework and the next, probably also leadership in one or other member states.
All right, so we'll have to see whether these benchmarks will be hit. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you very much.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. The European Union has approved the suspension of visa-free travel for holders of Georgian diplomatic and service passports. This comes as European officials have raised concerns over the political direction of the ruling Georgian Dream government.
The decision was initially adopted by the European Council in December 2024 under the EU's revised visa suspension mechanism and is now set to take effect in early March 2026. The restrictions apply to senior Georgian officials, including the president, prime minister, and parliamentary leadership. Brussels has framed the move as a targeted pressure on political decision-makers rather than the broader population. EU officials have indicated that a full suspension of visa liberalization for all Georgian citizens remains possible if Tbilisi fails to address concerns and repeal contested legislation.
According to Ukrainian reports, Russian infantry assaults against Ukrainian positions declined moderately after Kremlin forces lost access to black market Starlink terminals. Russia has also reportedly faced slowdowns across popular communication platforms that it uses in military operations.
SpaceX disabled unauthorized Starlink terminals on February 4th following a request from Kyiv, cutting off systems widely used by Russian units for encrypted communications and drone operations. Ukrainian forces, which operate authorized terminals, were largely unaffected. And the week after the shutdown, Russian ground attacks and artillery strikes fell by roughly 20 to 30%.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.